Welcome to Getting Sketchy Live, brought to you by thevirtualinstructor.com. And now, let's get sketchy.
Hello there, everyone. Matt here with thevirtualinstructor.com, and welcome to Getting Sketchy Live here on YouTube. And this is a show where either myself or my good friend and fellow artist and art teacher Ashley Hurst tries to create a drawing for you in a time frame, usually 45 minutes. So there's a challenge there, of course. But we're also trying to give you some drawing instruction as well, and also encouraging you to practice along with us, because practice is actually how you get better at any skill, and drawing is a skill just like any other skill that anyone can learn and develop, including you, no matter how much experience you've had or how much knowledge you have. So this is meant to be fun. It's called Getting Sketchy because we are going to create a sketch, obviously, but we're also a couple of sketchy dudes. So let me, of course, welcome Ashley here to the broadcast. Ashley, how you doing?
Who are you calling sketchy?
Oh, you know how sketchy you are.
It's good to see you guys back here. This week, I'm looking forward to seeing what Matt has to offer. I've already seen his reference. I hope you're going to follow along. You've got your art materials ready, and you're raring to go.
Yeah, tonight we're going to be working with just a regular old graphite pencil. In fact, I'm going to use the same pencil that I did 2 weeks ago, which is a black wing pencil, and white drawing paper. You're welcome to use any materials that you want. What's most important, of course, is that you are flexing those artistic muscles and strengthening them. And, of course, the way to do that is to look at something and draw it, which is what I'm going to be doing. If you are watching this live on YouTube, there's a chat box, of course. You can ask questions and make comments. And if you put them in all capital letters, that will help Ashley see them a little bit easier amongst all the other comments and questions, because sometimes, honestly, the chat box gets rolling really quickly, and it's real easy to miss one of your comments or questions. So if you put it in all capital letters, that will help him see it a little bit easier. Now, if you're brand new to this kind of thing, or you're brand new to the channel, I would encourage you to subscribe. We cover a broad variety of drawing and painting, media, and subject matter here. We do Getting Sketchy in seasons, and we usually do them every week. This week is, I think it's episode 9. This is episode 9.
That's right. Episode 9. We're going to have 10 plus a bonus episode. Is that right? So we've got two more to go.
That's right. We're going to have episode 9, but it's not going to be next week. So it's going to be the week after that. Ashley is going to be out of town next week, and he's scheduled to do the sketch. So we're going to take next week off. That's also going to include our live lessons. Now, if you're wondering what the live lessons are, after we broadcast here on YouTube, we head over to the Virtual Instructor, and the live lessons are not in seasons. They're every week, well, excluding next week. And we go into more depth with the live lessons. That's a slower process. We start a piece of artwork and go all the way through completion. Every stroke, every mark there is part of those series. They are in series. Sometimes they go for a long period of time because we are creating complete pieces of artwork. But of course, the live lessons are part of our membership program, which also includes a variety of drawing and painting courses on a variety of subject matter and media, graphite pencils, pen and ink, pastels, charcoal. There's a ton to explore over at thevirtualinstructor.com. There's also a year-long curriculum for visual arts teachers, which includes basically everything you need to teach, minus the materials, of course. And if you want to learn more about the membership program, there's a link in the description below this video. Clicking on it will take you to a page that will give you more information about our membership program. Everybody starts off with a free trial for a week, and there's a 30-day money-back guarantee after that. So we want to make sure everybody's pretty happy with the membership program. If you want to just kind of dip your toes in the water with the membership program, you can check out 3 course videos and ebooks for free. There's also a link for that in the description below this video. Did I say everything I need to say?
Yeah, I think you got everything in there. It's a really, a great opportunity to learn, and it's pretty much no risk since you do have that money-back guarantee.
All right, I think we're ready to start drawing there. Oh. Go ahead and pop my knuckles. I never do that. I never pop my knuckles. I don't know why I just did that.
I hope you didn't pop any knuckles you're going to need.
There clearly was pent up whatever is in there, whatever causes that popping.
There was
sound.
a lot of popping there.
Yeah, so. That was a pretty hardcore. I never do that. I think it's bad for you to do that.
I tell my kids don't pop their knuckles, so I'm going to tell you the same thing.
Right.
Don't pop your knuckles. I don't know if it's bad for you, but I think my mom told me that, so we're just going to pass it down through the generations.
All right, well, that will be the last time I pop my knuckles. Probably not. But anyway, let's go ahead and switch over to the main camera. right. So I saw that there was a little bit of discussion there in the chat box before we went live over what it was that I am drawing, and here it is. It is a scorpion. This
Ouch.
season I've been doing all kinds of organic subjects, and this subject is an organic subject, but it's got kind of a more of a rigid feel associated
Hard
with it.
edge.
Yeah, it's kind of
organic
almost
subject.
like a piece of machinery, even though it's not. So it should be a good challenge, we'll put it that way. But in my hint with the email that I sent out, I said that it was something that has outlasted or been around longer than the dinosaurs, and that's true. And that this subject was going to be striking. So strike. So those were my
it's
two
very
hints
striking.
This week. So anyway, a couple of people were guessing different things, but it is in the title of the video there. So. All right, so I think we're about ready to get into it, but first let me just go over the materials real quick. Like I mentioned, I'm going to be using a Blackwing pencil. I'm going to be using the matte pencil, and this pencil is really nice and smooth. It feels really good to use, and I've just sharpened this with a blade. Sometimes I like to sharpen my wooden pencils with an X-Acto blade, so I get a little bit more graphite exposed. And I also get a little bit of a sharper tip as well. I have a kneaded eraser handy. I also have an electric eraser.
Yes.
Don't know if I'll use it or not, but I have it. And I have a little Tombow mono eraser here too. Both of these erasers have what's called a vinyl or plastic eraser inside of it. And this is a good old kneaded eraser, which is really my favorite eraser of all the erasers in the world.
There was a little bit of discussion about carbon pencils. I think Brent Does Art and maybe a couple others had thought you were going to draw with carbon pencils.
Yeah,
Was that something that we had talked about?
Yeah, I thought about the carbon pencil, and I decided to go with the matte pencil instead because the matte pencil, to me, this Blackwing matte pencil feels somewhere in between the carbon pencil and a softer graphite pencil. It's not as shiny as traditional graphite.
Okay.
It still has a little bit of a shine, but the carbon pencil, of course, has very little, if any, shine. But the thing about the carbon pencil is a little bit bulkier, and it's a little bit more like a charcoal pencil in terms of
So the filament, the lead
its
inside
bulkiness.
is
And I'm
thicker.
just going to reach in my drawer if I can and see if I can find a carbon pencil here real quick. Here's one. So
There
you
we
can
go.
see that the lead, there's a lot more of it, and it wears down really quickly like a charcoal pencil.
Yeah.
And just for the subject and the size, there's a lot of details in this scorpion. So that's why I'm going with the matte pencil instead of the carbon pencil. But the carbon pencil will make an appearance, I'm sure, in future episodes of Getting Sketchy.
And Adrian asks, is that a 2B pencil?
It's not a 2B pencil. It is a Blackwing matte pencil, which is about as dark as I'm just trying to get the
So Blackwing's
the mic,
unusual. They don't really designate their pencils as 2B, HB, 2H. They don't have designations like that, right?
Right. They have the matte pencil. They have one that's the super smooth
And
pencil.
they all seem to be pretty dark. They all, to me, both of those pencils that Matt's mentioned so far, both seem like drawing pencils. They're darker than your writing pencil, a number 2 pencil.
The white pencil is definitely the lightest, and I was looking in my drawer to see if I could pull that out, but I would have to stand up again, so I'm not going to do that. But yeah, this is about equivalent to about a 3B, somewhere in there, pencil. And so I'm going to be able to get a full range of value with just this pencil.
Okay, super.
And yeah, so is it a 2B or not 2B? That is the question.
And
that was the
still
answer.
the question.
Yeah. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I'm going to fit the scorpion within the picture plane. And I went ahead, you have to look real close, but I went ahead and put a couple of dots here. And I'm just going to go ahead and make those dots a little bit stronger here.
Wait a minute. We're missing the timer.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, let me bring up the timer here. And there we go, 45 minutes.
There we go.
So anyway, I've got these couple of dots here just to make sure that I fit the scorpion within the picture plane.
Okay.
It gives me a nice starting point for measurements. So I'm just going to actually just start here and kind of draw a little bit of a diagonal. I'm going to try to get the gesture of the scorpion in place here. Last week the week before that, when I did the elephant, I took a different approach. I actually started by making comparisons. In this case, I'm going to start with the center portion of the scorpion, and then I'm going to make some comparisons once I have the center shape in place. So a little bit of a different approach. And honestly, this is the approach that I normally take for most of the subjects that I draw.
To me, it feels like you've found the outermost edges of your scorpion, those dots on the right and left side, and then working from the middle out, you're likely to hit those dots. So those dots are almost like a target, like a bullseye to aim at. I think it's good to have something to aim at so that you don't run out of paper. I've made drawings before and started too large without having an idea of my target on the other side, and just ran out of room.
Yep. That happens a lot with beginning artists, that they'll start, maybe they're drawing a person, let's say, and they'll start at the head, and then they'll start working their way down. And then before you know it, their mouth is off the bottom of the paper.
Or when I was a kid,
no
I would
good.
have to squeeze their legs down a little bit. You make the legs just a little shorter to get those shoes on the page.
So I'm just kind of defining the contour here a little bit, and also trying to make sure that I've got the right length here, or approximately correct length. And I'll just bring that.
Well, I like
in
how you
now.
started with a sort of a smoother, irregular shape, and once you were satisfied with that, you've gone back to find those actual contours to include those bumps instead of trying to capture those and the overall shape at the same time.
Yeah, I just like to look for a simple shape and then think about the contour lines instead of thinking about the contour lines first, which slows you down too. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to simplify this claw up here. It's kind of an oval.
Now, we do have a question from Hannah. What kind of paper are you drawing on right now?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. This is just 70 or 80 pound white drawing paper. This is what you would find in your sketchbook.
Okay.
So just standard drawing paper. It has a little bit of a tooth associated with it, but it's not crazy.
We've been
Not a
keeping it a
crazy
little
tooth.
simpler this season, you might have noticed, in our media and paper selection. It's fun to explore unusual media and unusual supports, but we can make great art with limited materials and in a short period of time. So it's sort of been a theme at least for myself, and I think for Matt somewhat too, this season.
Yeah, and some of the mediums, just being honest and transparent, some of the mediums are a real challenge to finish in the allotted 45 minutes.
It's true.
The graphite drawings are a whole lot easier to get a full range of value and get a more developed drawing than something, let's say, like pastels, which really lend themselves to larger images anyway, even though we've done a couple with pastels and other challenging mediums. So you can see here with the claw, I just drew an oval first, and then I went into that oval and started basically just carving out the rest of the claw. And again, I'm making comparisons as I go. So I'm looking at the space from here to here, and I'm trying to get that as close to accurate as possible, but I'm not obsessing over it either. It doesn't have to be perfect.
We've got a question from Simon. Do I need to know every type of paper, pencils, and erasers to be a professional artist? No, you don't, but it is a professional, just being exposed to the tools of the trade, you're going to learn a lot about them. But typically, most artists kind of find what works for them. They kind of build a box in which to create. And not a physical box, of course, a box that limits them in terms of media and supports, things like paper and canvas and such. And then an artist masters that selected group of media. Now, as an art teacher, we try to master them all because we get questions about all the different media. So I would draw a distinction there between art as education versus maybe art as a profession, like possibly an illustrator. If you were an illustrator, maybe working with children's books, that kind of thing, you would actually probably develop a style that is partially determined by your media and paper or support selection. And then you have to stick with that so that your style is somewhat recognizable.
Well, that's what one of my professors told me a long time ago. And I didn't listen to him. And I'm glad I didn't, because probably wouldn't be drawing the scorpion for you right now if I did. So it's different for everybody. I think you're going to get better at any medium and subject matter that you repeat. In fact, I critiqued a piece today that was sent in for the Members Minute from a person who has sent in several artworks, and it's the same motif, so the same type of subject, in the same medium, and her art has just it was good to begin with, but it's even gotten even better, and she's really developed an artistic voice, and that's going to work for most people. But some people like to explore and do lots of different media. And for example, like Michelangelo, he was more than a sculptor, obviously. And there are lots of artists that are like that. And of course, sometimes just only one particular medium becomes what they're most well known for.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. I think about George Seurat. We've brought him up before. He's so well known for his pointillism, his paintings of dots, colorful dots that add up to be a painting. But I love his charcoal drawings, and I wasn't really exposed to those until I got to college, and actually just kind of bumped into them in a book on my own. So you're probably right there, Matt. Most professional artists probably have an appreciation for and use a wider variety of media than we actually get to see on exhibition.
And another thing that I'll just mention here, you're definitely going to get better at a specific medium if you stick to that medium and that in a specific subject matter. That's how you're going to get better at that little area the quickest. But don't close yourself off to other media too quickly either and say, this is the type of artist that I am. This is the type of artist I will always be, because things change, and the way you view art changes, and the way you want to make art may change as well. For years, anybody who would listen to me, I would tell anybody who listened to me that I was a black and white artist, and I was only going to work in pen and ink and graphite for the rest of my life. And just to show you how ignorant I was at the time, that was before I had even tried drawing with colored pencils the correct way, or the way in which the colored pencils perform at their best. And when I discovered colored pencils, that changed who I became as an artist. I started to enjoy and love color. And so just don't close yourself. And that was, it was really before, it was when I was in college, and I was forced to use colored pencils for a specific assignment that I discovered how much I loved them. So, and it was because nobody had actually taught me how to use them correctly. But I was taught how to use them correctly, and that changed how I viewed my art anyway. Then I wanted to explore all kinds of things because it was exciting to find a new medium that I enjoyed and that I was good at.
Well, that scorpion is looking pretty good so far.
Thanks.
Still got lots
just
of time
to
on the
recap
clock.
here real quick, I'm moving pretty quickly with this drawing, actually, looking at the time. So I think I'm going to have lots of time to shade here. But I also get really overconfident when I'm doing this, getting sketchy stuff, and then I run out of time. But I just want to reiterate the fact that I'm just taking this. I started with the large shape in the middle. Then I used that shape to make comparisons to find this shape. Then within this shape, the smaller shapes. Same thing with this and this and that and this. So I'm just started with a shape and then made comparisons from there.
One shape kind of leads you to and informs the size and placement of the next shape.
Yeah, you just have to have something to compare.
Yeah.
You have to have something to use to make comparisons. Now I'm going to get my pencil.
There's been a little bit of a
sharpen.
discussion about the Blackwing pencils and actually how expensive they are. They are about $2 a pencil. That's true.
Yeah, they're not cheap, but that's another thing I don't want to go too deeply in here because there are...
I mean, it's going to last a long time.
Yeah, there are two different ways
to
look at things as far as expense goes for materials. One way to look at it is, if you take your art seriously, then you probably want to be using higher quality materials. And I know that there's people that look at a pencil or they look at some other medium, and they say, well, this brand is exactly like the other brand, and there's no difference. One's not better than the other one, and you don't have to spend that much on materials. And that would be
sometimes,
great,
but not in art materials.
Yeah, that would be great if that was true with everything, but it's just not. Sometimes you do get higher quality when you pay for it. In fact, that's the case most of the time. And sometimes the art materials that are better are just disproportionately more expensive.
You know, the pencil is your only connection to your drawing. You know, you don't want to have a bad connection. No pun intended there. But the feel of the material in your hand, that tactile experience is just as important in keeping us from getting frustrated while we're working our artwork. You know, nothing's worse than a pencil or it doesn't have enough, covering power or enough pigment, or paint without enough pigment so it doesn't mix well. You don't want to get frustrated with those types of technical issues while you're trying to create. So a pencil is a cheap media as media goes, or cheap medium as media goes. So a $2 pencil is expensive, but it's not a $70 tube of purple oil paint. So when you're buying that $2 pencil, just keep reminding yourself that.
All right, so I'm just continuing to work my way back to the back edge of the scorpion here, and I'm going to work my way back here for a second and just make some notes on where we have these looks like little plates on their back.
Yeah, kind of like a washboard. Looks like a washboard.
Just kind of getting an idea of where those are, because that's going to affect where I place the value here. It's a little bit of a little tricky pattern here. It looks like it gets dark when it rises up, then gets dark again right when it recesses. So
you're looking for some marks in there that's going to indicate where the light and dark meet.
Yeah.
See some extra contour lines. Okay. Contour lines can be the outlines around the shapes that Matt has been working with mostly, but they can also be lines that follow shadows or the edges and ridges of a form.
Yeah, just basically where I see contrast right now. And I'm not overthinking it either. So I do think I lucked out and have the same number of ridges.
Did you? I don't usually. A lot of times I don't count that stuff. I just go for it. So
yeah, I didn't count it either, and just kind of worked out. Some drawings I do count depending on what it is. If I'm drawing a spider, I want to make sure there's 8 legs there. But most of the time, it just doesn't really matter. All right, let's bring this hind leg up. And again, I'm just making comparisons. It looks like the bulk of this shape comes right up out of this joint and goes all the way up to about right here on the abdomen. I guess that would be the abdomen. I don't know if this is an arachnid. So it's a little bit different.
Okay, we've got a question from Sunflower Cherry. I think that's right. Sunflower Cherry Flower 12. Sorry, I don't have my reading glasses on. It says, guys, one question for the drawing. Can you do more shading? Don't worry. I just want you to know, don't worry. That's coming. We still have 30 minutes in the drawing. Sometimes we shade early, and sometimes we kind of save it as sort of a step 2 or step 3 in the process. So the shading is coming right around the corner.
Yeah, and I'm telling you this because it's fresh on my mind. The last post, by the way, these Getting Sketchy episodes, I like to do a write-up about them after they're done and publish the write-up with the video on the blog over at thevirtualinstructor.com. And I just got caught up with the elephant one. I still need to publish yours from last week.
Oh, yeah.
But, and I talked about the shading in that particular Getting Sketchy episode. And I show you on that blog post, if you go take a look at it, a comparison between an elephant drawing that I completed for the live lesson series, which that drawing took about, 16 to 20 hours on a larger sheet of paper. It's still a graphite drawing, same media. And I compare it with the sketch that I did for Getting Sketchy. And I talk about the fact that the beginning stages of both drawings were the same. We were still trying to find basic shapes for the most part. But what was the differentiating factor between how rendered the live lesson drawing was compared to the sketch was how much time I spent adding the value or creating or doing the shading. And that was the difference in the level of realism and also the amount of time that I spent on the drawing. So this beginning stage here where I'm getting the shapes in place, that's going to be, if I wanted to spend 20 hours on this scorpion, which I could, I guess, I would be starting the drawing the exact same way. I'd probably be doing a larger version so I had more room. But so the shading is going to go quickly, but our goal here will still be to have a full range of value, meaning that we have the darkest darks, the lightest lights, and the grays in between. But it just won't be as smooth or as polished as a more finished drawing. So shading is the part that slows you down. Okay, so I want to point out something. This was the mark that I made for the tail end of the scorpion.
Mm-hmm.
And I could try to force it out here, but I'm not. This was a guideline. It gave me an idea of how far over I needed to go. And you can see that's pretty close with the hind leg here. And looking at the reference, I see that the tail needs to go more straight up. It doesn't need to go quite out as far as that tail end. So it's going to need to curl up at this point. So if I tried to force it out here, that would be a mistake. So I'm going to try to draw these in segments here. I was thinking about maybe just drawing the entire shape, but I think I'm going to do segments.
All right, Alana has a question. I would remember if you have a question, we'll see it best if it's in all caps, but I'm trying to read them all, even if they're not in all caps. So just help, just remember that little tip if you want your question read. So Alana asks, tips for accuracy, guessing the angle a line is at, like the angle of an edge or a line. I'm drawing a house at an angle and having a hard time working out the angles. Well, I'll tell you what I like to do. I like to use my pencil as a tool for capturing that angle. Now, if you're working from a photograph, it's a little bit easier than if you're working from life, but the process is pretty much the same. You want to hold your pencil so that it is parallel to your, to your face, and then tilt it until it lies on the line or the angle that you're trying to capture. Okay, and then what I like to do is keep my, preferably with my artwork propped upward, vertical. I like to sort of stiffen my hand and wrist and just slide my pencil over in front of my drawing or my painting. So I'm basically transferring the angle that's in front of me, be it in a photograph or if it's in life, and just capturing that with a tilt of my pencil and then transferring that over and just study it for a second, the tilt of your pencil in front of your canvas or drawing, and then make your mark. And so that's a type of, that's using your drawing tool for sighting, which is the term that some people use for measuring or capturing angles or edges with their pencil.
That's really great advice. Now, if you're doing a house and it is for a client, in other words, it needs to be completely, perfectly accurate, there are other ways that you can ensure accuracy in your drawing. Of course, you can use the grid technique, where you place a grid over a photo reference and, of course, make a corresponding grid on another sheet of paper. That'll make sure all your angles are completely correct. When I used to do house portraits, I would use a little, I guess it was a little sewing measurement tool. It was like a little ruler that was about this long. Mm-hmm. And I probably still have it somewhere around here. And it had little measuring things on it. And what I could do is I could just take that ruler, since it was so small, and lay it over the photo reference and then keep the angle the same and move over. And I could also use it to make measurements. So the ruler had little places where I could mark on it, of course, and I would mark on it where different relationships occurred in the reference and then just bring that over to the drawing surface. And then, of course, if you're drawing a house from imagination, you could always use some form of linear perspective. And that would also help to ensure some.
Yeah, if you can actually
angles are
identify
correct.
where that vanishing point is in your drawing or outside of the picture plane, then that's probably the greatest help of all. That's true. All right, let's see. Still catching up on some of the questions. Laura Rainbow Dragon says some of the brands that Matt likes are ridiculously expensive, even in Canada. And of course, that goes back to us talking about the quality of your materials and sometimes getting what you pay for when it comes to art materials.
What are the brands?
Well, I don't know. We'll have to hear what those are.
Just if you'll put some of the brands in there.
All right.
Yeah, some of the brands that I do like to use are expensive. Some are not so expensive, though. So, but, brands are a personal thing, and you need to find what works for you, whether it's cheap or not. But there is that little bit of a disclaimer that we talked about before, that the quality of the materials does matter. And if you're brand new to art, then you don't need to go out and spend bukus of money on materials. But if you're taking your art seriously, then you probably need to take the materials that you use seriously as well. It's just like any other. It's like a sport, for example. Like, I don't know much about skiing, but I would say that somebody who's a professional skier would probably be using skis that are probably more expensive than a beginner skier.
Than what I would use.
Yeah,
than what I would rent.
assume
Actually, than
that.
what I would rent.
Like,
That's what I do when I go skiing. I just rent equipment.
again, I've been skiing once in my life, but I'm just trying to come up with an example. I do play tennis though, and I've played tennis for a number of years, and the rackets that I play with are expensive, and I would not want to play with a racket that I did not buy from a specialty tennis shop.
Yeah.
And get
You wouldn't want
strung
me
with,
to make a racket for you at a discount. My first racket.
right.
Yeah. You don't want to take a chance. You don't want to take it. You're a professional. You don't want to take a
Definitely not.
chance.
Well, I'm not a professional tennis player, but
No. Okay, let's see. We've got a question. This goes back to shading. This, again, is from Sunflower Cherry. What about inks? Can you use them to paint the scorpion? Yeah, you could definitely do that. This would be a good candidate for an ink wash.
I thought about it. I thought about using ink and a brush.
And a hairdryer. Because we had
not
to
a hairdryer. I was just going to
speed up
use the ink to put on solid areas with the brush.
Okay.
Just solid black ink, and the ink dries pretty quick. So,
Yeah.
but again, I decided just to stick with this pencil because of the time constraint, and also because of the limited materials that some people might have.
That's true. You want the most people to be able to follow along in real time, but you don't have a timer. So if you're using a different media, or if you're at about the same stage or about to reach the same stage that Matt is at, and you want to shade with a different material, you don't have another show to do after this one. So you could choose to use ink or you could use watercolor, even though this one isn't in color, but you could use another media as well. Any other media as well.
This one would actually work really well for pen and ink with watercolor. This image is from Pixabay. It was a collection of different scorpions, and I chose this scorpion out of the bunch to do. And I put the cast shadow underneath it using Photoshop. I actually did quite a bit of manipulation. I flipped the image, took the color out, but this scorpion is kind of a brownish color. It would have been really nice for pen and ink and watercolor, actually.
Yeah.
But all right, so now I'm ready to start shading, which is basically the process of developing the value. Value is the darkness or lightness of a color. It's obviously very important.
Adrian asks, are you going to use a value scale for this drawing?
I hadn't planned on it. I didn't
mean to spoil you guys out there last week by drawing a little value scale, but it is helpful. And then you can look at the scale and look at an area and
I'm going to
name
make a
it.
real tiny value
There
scale
you go. Oh,
down
yeah.
here.
That's great. It's so small, it's going to look like a gradation when he's done.
If I do it correctly.
Well, this is about how big my value scales were when I was drawing in drawing 1 and drawing 2 back in college. We always had one on our page, and it was only about an inch long.
This is super
so,
tiny.
It is so tiny.
Super tiny.
I think 2 and 3 look a little bit. I'm critiquing his value scale. It's so small on my screen I can barely see. Okay, that looks good. Let's use that.
Okay.
There we go. There we go. So we've got a 7-step value scale ready to go.
And if it helps you to look at your value scale, if you need a value scale, I would recommend, creating one that you use over and over again.
Yeah, make a really nice one or a whole page of them in different media. That's what I do. And I've got value scales with 3 different ink shading techniques, hatching, cross-hatching, and stippling, and then a graphite value scale. And those 4 value scales are all on the same page so that I can refer to them if I'm working in those in one of those media or using one of those processes.
But I will not refer to the value scale here. I'm just going to, just for a couple of reasons. One, I'm under a time constraint, obviously. And I just kind of like to move my eyes and try to match the value that I see as I work through each little section. So, and then if I see something that's kind of inconsistent or I need to go darker or whatever, I'll compare it and see if I need to go darker or lighter. But right here, right up to the edge here, there's a little bit of a lighter area right after it. So I'm going to make this side a little bit darker because sometimes you do need to adjust the value that you see in your reference so that it works for your drawing.
It's true. You may want more contrast than between 2 objects or 2 parts than you're getting. So you can just force those values slightly further apart to get that contrast. Simon has a question. Can I rewatch this stream later? Yes, you can. So you'll be able to finish your drawing or rewatch a certain segment if you need to.
It'll be on YouTube as soon as we're done here. And you can watch it as many times as you want. Now, I could refine this drawing a little bit by pulling out a blending stump and then doing a combination of blended areas, areas that are not blended.
I could see that in this drawing. There's a couple of textures in there.
Yeah, there's this area that I'm working on right now is actually pretty smooth in texture. But I'm not going to do that here because, again, breaking out the blending stump will slow things down tremendously. And if you're not careful with the blending stump, you can end up with a drawing that looks like it's kind of been addressed in the same way throughout the drawing.
All right. Stephen has a question that I'm not sure I can answer, but I'm interested to talk about. It says, have any of you been interested in urban sketching? Urban sketching. So I don't know what urban sketching is, but I have 2 theories. To me, urban sketching would be sketching scenes of urban life, or it could be, sketching outside down in the city. And so that's just my guess. And I guess I'm interested in that because I've done a lot of that. I do live in a city. And so I draw cityscapes and buildings and people walking on in street scenes. Typically, those are some subject matter that I'm familiar with just because it's familiar to my area. But I don't know if that's what urban sketching is.
Urban sketching is what you would think it would be.
Okay.
As you described, drawing cityscapes, basically.
Yeah.
But it has become almost its own style.
I got you.
And the style is basically, for the most part, it's a combination of watercolor and pen and ink. And I'm not really sure.
It's got a lot of energy to it. The energy that you could feel from maybe that I would imagine is in our downtowns. Very lively.
I don't know.
I think it should be.
That far.
All right, I'm going to do an urban. It's sketching, right? So it's got to have some looseness to it.
I'm going to tell you what it is.
There, right?
I'm not really sure how it has become synonymous with a style.
Okay.
But it has, and that style is a combination of watercolor and pen and ink.
Okay, kind of like architectural renderings.
Kind of.
Okay.
In a looser manner.
That's kind of what I was imagining. Yeah.
Pen and ink and watercolor.
Okay.
And I'm not really sure.
So it's more than a subject matter. It really defines the style and the subject matter.
It's the style and the subject matter. So when most people, at least most people who approach me about urban sketching, when they are asking me about it, most of the time they are referring to a process of combining watercolor and pen and ink to draw city scenes. And I think there might be a course or two out there where somebody...
I see.
The subject is urban environments, but the style was pen and ink and watercolor, and that has caught on, and it has become like a thing now. I think you remember when the adult coloring books kind of took... it's not the same. It's definitely a little bit more highbrow than that, but it is still... A specific style is now associated with urban sketching. So when you think urban sketching, or when I think urban sketching, when a lot of people probably think urban sketching, they are probably thinking about that combination of watercolor and pen and ink. But it could, in my mind, just like it was in your mind, it could mean any type of medium, just doing cityscapes on location, you know?
I love that. Well, thanks for helping me out. Thanks for bringing me up to speed.
So, well, what was the original question?
Just if you were interested in that. And I have done paintings of cities, cityscapes, so plenty of that. And I've done artwork that is a combination of, actually I'm thinking of one right now that is a cityscape that was a combination of watercolor and ink. So I guess I have been interested in it all along. All right, let's see.
I will point out, there is a course at the Virtual Instructor called Line and Wash, and the whole course is about combining watercolor with pen and ink.
Okay, perfect.
Now, we cover a variety of subjects. It's not, just cityscape.
Not specific to urban
We do a
environments.
landscape, but it's not a cityscape. So.
Maybe one day it will be. Tear those trees down, put up a parking lot.
Yeah.
Be super. Okay, let's see. I think Laura Rainbow Dragon is from Canada and is telling us that Blackwing pencils are $50 for 12 there, and that's for a product imported from the UK. So it would likely there would be an import fee on top of that. So wow.
Is that $50 Canadian?
I'm not sure. That would be my guess.
That is different than $50
and
US.
Laura Rainbow Dragon also says that Stonehenge paper there is more expensive than the prices that you typically quote it for.
Yeah, Stonehenge paper is expensive everywhere.
It's expensive anyway. That's true.
It's expensive paper. And, it depends on how you look at it. You pay, I don't know, I'm not really sure how much the Stonehenge paper I bought recently was, but I bought a bunch of it. Let's just say it works out to about $5 a sheet.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's
accurate or not. And
then
you can cut that down for the size that you work.
Yeah,
get a couple of pieces out of that.
But I would never sketch on Stonehenge paper.
No.
Like this drawing, I would never do on Stonehenge paper.
Serious drawing time.
Right. I would only use my Stonehenge paper for a drawing that I'm planning on spending a good investment of time on.
Because it'll hold up. This paper that you're using might not hold up for 16 or 20 hours of really heavy working.
It might, but the Stonehenge paper, I like the way it behaves with certain media, and it's a higher quality paper. So if I'm going to invest 20 hours of my time into a drawing, which is not unusual, on Stonehenge paper, then I don't mind spending $5 for a sheet of paper. That the work of art is worth it. But if I'm just practicing and I'm learning, then I might not spend that much money on paper, and that makes total sense.
I think the first year of college drawing classes, I worked on newsprint. It was going to deteriorate before the end of the semester.
Newsprint's actually a great surface to work on.
Actually, it does feel good. Yeah. But it does, I can look at my drawings now, and they're pretty... I'm talking about 20-year-old drawings. I'm afraid to shake those pieces of paper. I'm afraid to roll those pages up. They'll probably deteriorate in my hands. So, it was very cheap paper. Very cheap. Because we would literally maybe draw on anywhere from 5 to 15 sheets in a 4-hour-long class period. We were constantly stopping and turning to the next page. Our professors and I didn't want to spend tons of money on a sheet that I was only going to work on for sometimes 20 minutes.
Well, newsprint's designed for practice.
Yeah. All right. Well, you're making good headway in the Scorpion. We've got almost 10 minins left.
I just looked up at the time.
I was going to point that out. Just wanted you to be aware of it.
I'm not making good progress anymore. I'm making slow progress. just like I said, I get overconfident and I start talking about the drawing, and then I realize, hey, I'm running out of time here. So I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit with the shading.
Okay, so urban sketching is really taking off. People get together and do it together. I love that. You know, we as artists often work independently and alone, you know, and that's not a bad thing because we want to be able to hear our own voice sometimes and not the voices that are kind of crowd our own voice out. But it's very encouraging to draw with other people. So I love the idea that people are getting together in cities and downtowns and in small towns and sketching outside together. And Teresa also says that there's a time constraint involved because everybody and everything's moving. Oh, I love that. You know, I draw from photographs all the time because it's convenient. And I have a classroom sometimes with 20 to 30 people in there. And we just can't find a good and interesting corner to look at, every one of us. So we use photographs. But drawing from life, particularly in scenes that are going to have variables that change, is really, really helpful for artists to learn to see the forest and not the trees, to see the big picture, what's most important, and also to capture the most important lines of a subject first in case that subject disappears and you have to finish by making it up.
Yeah, it'll definitely enhance your speed.
Yeah, that is fantastic. I think I would like to, if I knew that urban sketching involved getting together with other people, I think I am interested in that. So that's great. That's great to learn. I know what our art club is doing this year after school. We're heading downtown for some urban sketching.
Urban sketching is basically just a form of plein air painting.
Yeah. But, without the nature. You got trees. I mean,
but you got
without
people.
You substitute the trees for the people, right? You substitute buildings for mountains, but it's still getting outside in. It's still nature, right? There's still air, so it's nature.
There's still air.
I know
oxygen.
There's trees downtown. We have a lot of trees in our downtown area.
You can sometimes see the sky.
Yeah, right. If you tilt your head just right,
down,
you can see the sky through the buildings. Now, I like hard-edged objects anyway. You know, the subjects that I choose to draw are things like nuts and bolts and shiny keys and a lock. So you can imagine that I like cityscapes maybe a little bit more than landscapes just because I like the hard-edged nature of buildings and stairs and streets and cars. The geometry is clearer.
All right, so 6 minutes here. I'm really feeling the pressure here now.
Now, you know what I would do? I would shade over the whole thing using that value scale at about a number 4, and then I would add the dark spots and erase out the lights. This is my new process I've developed on getting sketchy.
You're going to start rendering everything.
I just shade early and shade often. I'm going to have that printed on a T-shirt. Shade early and shade often because that's what my big takeaway from 2 seasons on getting sketchy is, and it really happened to me because of it was another bug I was drawing, but it was the car, right? The beetle. And I spent so much time on the proportions of that beetle, and it looked fantastic. And it still looks okay. It still looks good. But I had to shade the whole thing in 10 minutes, and I could really kick myself for having left such little time to do so.
But, I think that approach, which I like to call rendering, is good for some subjects, and some subjects it's going to be a little bit more challenging to pull that off.
It's going to be challenging to pull those details back out.
Yeah, like this.
This would be a little harder. Yeah,
that would be.
You might actually spend more time on this one if you did it that way.
That would be a little tedious.
Yeah. It was perfect though for my kind of soft baseball glove that I did last week.
Yeah, and
kind of good for that.
The keys, you could erase out some of those highlights.
Right, that worked out really well for the keys, only because of the electric pencil sharpener. I could have done it without an electric pencil sharpener, but not in the time that we had left. It would have taken a little more effort. Okay, let's see. I may have gotten behind on questions because we have been talking for a little bit. I got kind of carried away. I was getting excited about urban sketching. So let me back up here for just a minute. And I apologize. Of course, there's a lot of comments in the chat, and sometimes they do get missed. I apologize if that happens to you. Okay, so there's a question I had my eyes on about the range of value from this Blackwing pencil. And we mentioned at the very top of the program, oh, there it is. The question is, does the Blackwing matte pencil give you about a 2B to a 4B range at its darkest, I would say, but it can go as light as your pressure sensitivity allows.
Yeah, and one thing that's great about this pencil, which is kind of similar, got a little too dark there, but one thing that's great about this pencil that's similar to another pencil I like, which is called the General's Layout Pencil, is that it keeps a sharper tip for a longer period of time. So compared to a 3B pencil, for example, a 3B pencil would be super dull at this point, and this pencil is not super sharp at this point, but it's still a little bit sharper than.
Have you sharpened it?
I have sharpened it a couple times.
Okay. You know, when you sharpen your lead out that long, you know, it tapers more gradually, so it seems like it's staying sharper longer. That's why I think that's why Matt likes such a long pencil tip, and that's why I do too. When I use one of those small plastic pencil sharpeners, the handheld pencil sharpeners, some of those, it cones the tip of the pencil so abruptly that the tip, you know, it flattens out a little too fast for my taste.
So I'm skipping up here to the top and saving the legs and shadows for the end here because I'm right-handed. I'm just trying to keep my hand out of the way and keep it from smearing anything on the surface. Go ahead and reinforce that contour line underneath here, which is not in the reference. That's an example of where I'm manipulating the value to a certain degree.
Okay, Christina has a question. How can you improve on your shading skills and techniques? That's a good question, and I guess one way would be, and I've got two answers that kind of go in two different directions. So let me write them down.
If I don't
write these two things down, I'll forget one of them.
Clearly, the best way to improve your shading is to practice. Now, what's important is
that's not what we're going to write down. No, go ahead, Matt. I'm just kidding.
Is that what you're going to write down?
No, that's what I wrote down. Practice, practice, practice. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, but it's the right kind of practice that's important. And I think the best way to practice is to find a variety of different textures, really challenging textures, like wrinkled up paper, rope and yarn up close, rocks up close, flowing water up close.
Ooh, yeah.
That kind of stuff is going to force you to look and pay attention to the values that you see, because shading is all about adding the value and recognizing the values that you see and then being able to apply them to the surface. So the bigger challenge you give yourself, the better you're going to improve, or the quicker you're going to improve, and the better your handling of shading is going to be.
Of course, one thing you can use to help you see those values and identify them is the value scale. A little one like Matt has on his paper. You can look at your subject and look at your value scale, and maybe let's say it's a guy wearing a blue coat, right? You look at the blue coat and say, okay, well the lighter blue areas look like value number 2 to me, and then you look at the shades, the shadows on the blue coat. Maybe they look like, according to the value scale, about as dark as number 5. You have already improved in your shading without making a mark, because you have stopped and analyze those values. And now you can shade directly down to those two values and know that they're going to be close. Now, here's my second tip. Besides using a value scale, which we've talked about before and I talked about a good bit last week, and that is to, a lot of times where I see people struggle isn't in a drawing like this, where it's already black and white. And I've been doing the same thing. I've been changing my drawings to black and white, but it's when we're drawing something that's in color or from life, and it can be hard to sometimes accurately capture those values. So something you can do is, draw from life or draw from a color photograph, and then take a picture of your drawing and take a picture of whatever your subject was. If it was already a photograph, that's fine. If it was from life, take a photograph and then change it to black and white after your drawing and see how accurate you were in translating colors to grays or to shades or shadows. And I'm assuming that we're talking about, shading in a similar way Matt's doing with a grayscale media.
Very good. I was going to add that.
That's something we do in the classroom sometimes.
Yeah, that's
say, all right, now let's change our picture to black and white and see how we did.
Yeah, we did that in design school.
Sometimes I find that people make reds too light. It is a dark color. So just a tip. Most reds are dark. They're bright but dark. So bright and light don't always go together. Things can be bright and dark, or dull but light. So.
Okay, I realized that the clock says time's up.
I didn't even notice it. I was just watching you shade. I was watching the roundness of those parts develop, and failed to see that the timer has expired.
But I do have a few minutes to go over. Remember, the timer is a suggestion. It's only here for drama, people. It's only to hype up the drama. But these little legs are a little bit lighter in value anyway, so.
Let's see. Abba Rain 7 says, time is up. What happens next? Boom.
I blow up, yeah.
It's an explosion, right? Everything is deteriorating around us, right? It's all falling back into the matrix
Okay,
code.
So I just want to point out that I'm losing the legs as far as value goes in the drawing. So I'm going back in with a little bit of a contour line, a little bit of a contour edge where it meets the body. And I'm pointing that out because sometimes if you just follow the values, you still have to enhance them to a certain degree.
You can improve.
To pull them out, to pull things out, pull edges out, and so on. I'm going to put a little bit of cast shadow underneath this after I finish these little legs. It's just, the scorpion is so hardcore and so mean looking and so cool looking. And then he's got these like little Muppet legs. These are like little tiny Muppet legs, almost like he's wearing little socks on the end. Look, there's even a line there. Like he's got little hot little socks. It
looks like Dr. Seuss drew those little feet.
It does. There's little calf muscles there, They're not calf muscles. Yeah. It's just the way the leg
It looks
goes.
like a tiny little person's leg to me now. That is disgusting. It looks like tiny little human legs hanging off of that thing. Oh, my goodness.
See, now that you've seen it, you can't unsee it.
I can't look. Yeah, I can't.
And I've been seeing it the whole time. I've been thinking, man,
gross.
What weird little legs for this evil-looking critter here.
Okay, somebody had a comment earlier, and I'm sorry, it's already off the screen. It was so funny. It said that rural. We were talking about urban sketching. It said that rural sketching is called landscape. I'm going to start using the term rural sketching instead of landscape.
Urban sketching.
See if we can bring it back. Let's revive it that way. I love landscape.
Urban sketching, cityscape. It's all landscape.
It's all still landscape, right?
It's all the same. But I think it is interesting that the urban sketching, there's definitely clearly a style associated with it. If you Google searched urban sketching, I have no idea what you would see, but I guarantee you it would be
I'm going to work this into a project for my students this next semester.
The urban sketching?
Yeah.
All right, let's throw a little cast shadow underneath this. So this scorpion looks like they are sitting on the ground. And we'll make it a little bit darker the closer the object is, or the part of the scorpion is to the ground. So it's got his claw down there close to the ground. And then we're going to get a little bit lighter as it comes away from its body. And like I said, I manufactured this shadow underneath here. So basically what I did is I took a silhouette of the scorpion and then used some Photoshop magic to add the shadow. And I'm not sure. I might show you how to do this in basic Photoshop for Artists. I'm not sure, but that's another course. So, I'm not sure if I demonstrate how to do that or not, but it's pretty simple. So again, underneath the body here where the leg meets, I'm just gonna put a little bit of a stronger line there.
Yeah, we've got to keep that shadow separate from the body.
This little Muppet leg coming out.
That's what Jen calls it, a Muppet leg.
Oh, she called it a Muppet leg?
Yep.
Yeah, I think it looks like Muppet legs.
Yeah.
So a little bit lighter up here close to the body.
Now, that's kind of funny because we don't ever see the Muppets' legs, do we?
Well, there are a couple movies where you see Kermit's legs, and it's
Okay.
like shocking when you
Okay.
see it. There's one movie where he's riding a bike with Miss Piggy. I think that's The Muppets Take Manhattan. That's where Kermit gets hit by a car and he loses his memory. You shouldn't be amazed that I know all this stuff, first of all, because I have a connection with Kermit the Frog. And we sound the same. Anyway, so Kermit gets hit by a car in that movie, and he forgets who he is. And none of his friends know where he is. He's in New York by himself. They've all abandoned him. He wanted to do a Broadway play, but they all went back. But Kermit followed his dreams and got hit by a car. So when he wakes up from getting hit by a car, he has amnesia, and he can't remember who he is. So the person helping him in the hospital says he just needs to go find a job and start a new life. So he goes and finds a job as at an advertising company.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hilarious. Have you seen
No.
Okay.
Clearly, I haven't seen it because I
Oh.
wasn't familiar with Kermit's legs.
all of the Muppet movies?
I
Are
thought
great.
I thought all the Muppets existed only from the waist up. Now,
Except-
I am a fan of the Muppets. I guess I just saw all the older ones, maybe, or the
older ones are
specials
the
that
good
came on
ones.
television. Yeah.
The new ones aren't bad, but the older ones are.
I feel
just
that way about anything
hilarious.
that's from my childhood that's been remade. I feel like it was always better when it was older, and that's because that was when I was first introduced to it, I guess. I like the older Peter Rabbit versus the newer.
Oh, the new
movies.
Peter Rabbit's awesome.
Oh yeah, it's awesome. I love the movies, but he just doesn't seem like the Peter Rabbit from my books. As
You
a
like the
little boy.
old cartoons?
I don't see the cartoons, but I
from
know
the
that
books?
Peter Rabbit. I imagine Peter Rabbit as having a distinctly different personality than he has in the movies.
well,
Not that there's
maybe-
anything
maybe
wrong with
you
his
imagined it
personality.
wrong.
He just doesn't seem like the one that I imagined. So
Well,
All right.
I would highly recommend the Muppet movies. The Muppet Cape, the Great Muppet Caper is good. The Muppet movie
Yeah.
is probably the best.
just called the Muppet Movie.
But Muppets Take Manhattan is really.
I
good
like the
too.
two guys in the theater up in the box on the side. Yeah, those are my favorites.
Yeah.
Those are my favorite Muppets.
Well, they're on the Muppet Show, which the Muppet Show is now on Disney Plus. So if you have Disney Plus, you can go back and watch the episodes. Not too long ago, we watched the episode that Mark Hamill was on from the 70s.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
How about that?
Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, that's cool.
All right. Anyway, I'm done with this one, I guess. We could push the value range a little bit further. It is a quick sketch.
Yeah,
some
it's
of
a
these,
great looking sketch. Look at those proportions. Very nice.
Yeah, some of these areas up here could go a little bit darker. And if I was going to refine this drawing, into a complete drawing, I would definitely probably make it larger. And you can kind of compare it to the size of my hand.
I'm all about looking at empty spaces and negative shapes. That's what I used to draw, and yours are right on here. The weirdo shape between that scorpion's back and tail is looks great. So
Yeah.
nice job with that.
Oh, thanks. And I would probably break out the blending stump and do a little bit of blending because this area back here is pretty smooth and reflective, and I'd probably go in and erase out the highlights. But I can't do this with a drawing this small, so it's definitely a sketch. But if you wanted to take yours a little bit further, at least you have an idea of how to do that. All right, we got any other questions or comments?
Brent Does Art says, seen all the Muppet movies. They're all great. Let's see.
They are all
Abba
great. They are
Yahweh
so
Rain
good.
7 says that this is a way cool art class. Borat would say, very nice drawing.
It's a very nice.
It's a very nice.
Very nice.
And Norleen says, I used to watch the Muppet Show. So we've really hit on a winner here with the Muppets.
Yeah, the Muppets are awesome. They're just the old Muppet Show, stuff like that just doesn't exist anymore, and it's such a shame because the Muppets were so great.
Yeah.
They really were somewhat unifying because it feels like when I used to watch the Muppet Show, we would watch it as a family, and it seemed like everybody stopped what they were doing to watch the Muppet Show. I mean, this is like the later 70s, early 80s.
Oh, yeah. It was
and
a
I
good
miss-
time. It's very creative.
I miss that kind of stuff. Me and
All
my
from
kids,
the
we
mind
watch
of one man, Jim
YouTube
Henson.
videos.
So-
We don't sit around and watch a show like the Muppets anymore. And to be honest with you, I think my kids would be bored, and I think that's sad. But we do watch the Muppet movies in the car, and it's hilarious just to listen to them over and over again. All right. Anyway, let's go ahead and switch back out over here. All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed the last 45 minutes, well, hour or so. I definitely enjoyed doing this drawing for you. Don't like scorpions, but I do like drawing animals like that because they have such interesting complexities about them, and they're so small. It's just an interesting dichotomy there. So just a reminder, next week we will not have an episode of Getting Sketchy. Ashley's going to be away, and it's going to be his turn to draw. So the week after that, which will be putting us the second week in August, I guess, we'll pick back up with episode 9 of this season. And then we're going to do one more bonus episode where we talk about the drawings that we created
Episode
this season.
10, I believe. I think this was episode 9.
Oh, yeah, this was episode 9. So
That's right.
episode 10 in a couple weeks. And then we'll have a bonus episode where we talk about the drawings. So we'll have 5 drawings a piece to talk about. That should be a lot of fun as well. So we're going to head over to the Virtual Instructor now if you're watching this live and continue on with the live lesson series, which Ashley is leading on oil painting. We are doing a still life. So if you guys, I know a lot of you go over there after this. We'll see you then over there. Ashley, do you have anything else to add?
I don't have anything to add. Apologize that I won't be here next week, but don't let that stop you from sketching in this designated time on your Wednesday night. And I'll see you in a few minutes or 2 weeks.
All right. With that, we're going to go ahead and sign out for this evening. Good night, everybody.